Welcome to 100 Sleepy Facts, where soothing facts slowly guide you into a peaceful night's sleep. The 5 minutes after the sky fell, Part 1. No creature on Earth saw the cataclysm coming, the utter obliteration that would rewrite the planet's history in fire and dust. Not the lumbering titan, a sauropod whose massive belly carved trenches through fern-choked swamps, its every footstep a tremor in the ancient Earth. Not the horned herds of ceratopsians moving across vast floodplains like living, breathing hills, their collective consciousness attuned to the subtle rhythms of the land, but blind to the cosmic horror approaching. Not the fearsome hunters, theropods with serrated knives for teeth and eyes that reflected the moon's cold light, apex predators whose reign was about to be abruptly, violently ended. Not even the smallest among them, the quick, the clever, the multi-tuberculates who scurried between roots and shadows, masters of survival in their miniature world. For the sky and all its unpredictable moods, its raging storms and fleeting comets and eerie auroras, had always been a constant, a protective ceiling that sheltered them all, a ceiling that impossibly, inexplicably would soon shatter. Until it did, far beyond the familiar blue haze of the atmosphere, beyond the highest reach of any soaring wing and the deepest gasp of any lung, something ancient and indifferent was plummeting towards them. Possessed no malicious intent, no primal hunger, no burning anger, only the implacable force of momentum. For untold ages it had drifted through the silent, lightless void, spinning slowly in its lonely orbit, a mountain-sized stone cloaked in a thick coat of frost and stardust, a relic of the solar system's violent birth. Then, with a subtle gravitational nudge from a distant star and the precise, cruel mathematics of celestial mechanics, it found a destination. Earth, and Earth, vibrant, teeming with life, resonating with the symphony of a million different species, continued its oblivious rotation beneath the impending doom. On that fateful morning, on the coast of the land that would one day be known as the Yucatán Peninsula, the air hung heavy with warmth and humidity. Shallow seas, teeming with unseen life, rolled in languid waves, weaving their way between dense mangrove thickets and low, sun-baked limestone shelves. The air was thick with the mingled scents of salt spray and pine resin, a primal aroma that spoke of ancient forests and untamed shores. Dragonflies, some as large as small birds with iridescent wings that shimmered in the sunlight, skated effortlessly above the water's surface, their multifaceted eyes scanning for prey. In the dense forests, a riot of green vegetation thrived, each plant competing for sunlight and sustenance, a constant silent struggle for survival. Young Quetzalcoatlus, not yet fully grown but already dwarfing any bird that would ever grace the skies, stood on its long, stilted legs at the edge of a tranquil lagoon. Its skin, stretched taut over its massive frame, was the color of sun-baked clay, providing perfect camouflage against the muddy banks. A magnificent crest like a crimson sail rose proudly from its head, its delicate veins pulsing with blood. Watch the water with a patience honed through countless failed hunts, an innate understanding of the delicate balance between predator and prey. Fish, silver flashes in the emerald depths, darted and weaved below the surface, oblivious to the shadow looming above. The Quetzalcoatlus leaned forward, its keen eyes locking onto a promising target. Then it paused, its massive head cocked slightly. Couldn't articulate why, couldn't process the subtle shift in the atmospheric pressure. Only that something in the very air had changed. An invisible tension, a palpable sense of unease, as if the world itself had inhaled deeply and was now holding its breath, refusing to exhale. Far inland, nestled within a verdant corridor of towering conifers and vibrant flowering shrubs, a small mammal, no bigger than a modern rat, a fleeting shadow in the undergrowth, sniffed cautiously at the wind from the relative safety of its burrow entrance. Its fur was dark and patchy, offering meager protection against the elements. Its eyes, bright and restless, darted nervously, constantly scanning its surroundings for any sign of danger. It had no name, not in any language that would ever be spoken, but it belonged to a lineage that would one day master the art of language, weave intricate songs, build complex machines, and, inevitably, know the profound depths of sorrow. It retreated a hesitant step, then another, deeper into the earth. The ground beneath its paws felt wrong. Not shaking, not yet, but pregnant with an unsettling anticipation. Deeper still, in the cool, dappled shade of a primeval forest, a creature poised between two worlds, a living bridge between dinosaurs and birds, hopped along a fallen log, its narrow beak pecking industriously at beetles hidden beneath the decaying bark. It was not quite a bird, not quite a dinosaur, yet it was both, a testament to the ever-evolving tapestry of life. Its arms were wings, still learning their purpose, still unsure of their full potential. Its bones were light and hollow, perfectly adapted for flight. Its heartbeat with a frantic, almost frantic rhythm. It paused mid-peck, a half-crushed beetle clutched in its beak and tilted its head upwards, its bright avian eyes searching the heavens. The sky was clear, an unsettling, pristine blue, too clear. Above all of them, hurtling towards them with unimaginable speed, the asteroid entered the atmosphere. At first it appeared as nothing more than a distant point of light, brighter than Venus, sharper than any star that had ever graced the night sky. Then, with terrifying swiftness, it began to blossom, swelling into a blazing spear, a harbinger of destruction, dragging a fiery tail of superheated gas and ionized particles behind it as the very air screamed in protest around its incandescent surface. For a fleeting, terrifying moment, the sun itself had a rival. Creatures across the entire hemisphere looked up, their senses overwhelmed by the sheer spectacle of the approaching doom. Some froze, paralyzed by a primal fear they couldn't comprehend. Some fled blindly, driven by an instinct older than time. Some simply stared, their ancient instincts warring with the reality unfolding before their eyes, unable to agree on what this terrifying new star meant for their world. The asteroid streaked across the sky with impossible speed, faster than the flight of any arrow, faster than the snapping jaws of any predator. 20 times the speed of a bullet, if there had been bullets to compare it to, a concept utterly alien to this world. Then it hit. Impact was not merely a sound, not in the conventional sense. It was a violent rearrangement of reality, a cosmic reset button pressed with unimaginable force. The asteroid slammed into the Earth with the raw, unbridled violence of a vengeful god's fist, and the planet recoiled in shock, its very foundations trembling. For a fraction of a second, the Earth's crust, the seemingly unyielding bedrock of the world, behaved like water, its solid form rendered fluid by the sheer force of the impact. Solid stone flowed outwards from the point of contact, rising in a monstrous ring of molten rock that would later collapse, leaving behind a permanent scar etched into the face of the planet, the Chicxulub crater. That infinitesimally small fraction of an instant, the ground at the impact site didn't simply crack or melt, it vaporized, utterly and completely vaporized, transformed instantaneously into superheated gas and incandescent dust, ripped apart at the molecular level, its constituent atoms scattered to the winds. The surrounding sea flashed into superheated steam, an explosive vaporization that sent shockwaves rippling outwards. Rock, once solid and unyielding, became searing plasma, a brief, ephemeral state of matter existing only in the heart of the apocalypse. The very air became a furnace, an inferno of unimaginable intensity, a colossal column of vaporized material, stone, water, salt, living things, the entire biosphere of the region, everything unlucky enough to exist within the immediate vicinity of the impact, shot upwards with such unimaginable force that it pierced the atmosphere and touched the very edge of space. It climbed and climbed, a towering pillar of fire and debris, a grotesque monument to destruction that momentarily became a second temporary atmosphere, a swirling vortex of incandescent particles. Then, inevitably, the relentless pull of gravity began to reclaim it, dragging it back down to the ravaged Earth. And the world, still turning inexorably on its axis, began in that instant to die. Near the lagoon, the young Quetzalcoatlus never even had the chance to utter a scream. The light arrived first, an unbearable wave of radiant energy, brighter than any lightning strike, brighter than the noonday sun on the clearest day. The horizon dissolved into a blinding line of white, then shifted to a searing gold, then finally erupted into a color beyond human comprehension, a shade of pure, unadulterated destruction. The air heated so rapidly that each breath became an agonizing experience, searing the lungs and scorching the throat. The creature's massive wings flared instinctively, an ancient, ingrained reflex to launch itself into the sky, to flee upwards into the perceived safety of the open air. But the sky itself was burning. Its delicate skin blistered and cracked before it could even complete the motion, the intense heat searing its flesh. Its eyes, wide, glossy, reflecting the doomed sky, clouded over as if someone had poured molten milk into them, the intense light blinding it instantly. The tranquil waters of the lagoon boiled in a rolling hiss, the surface erupting in clouds of scalding steam. Fish, caught in the sudden inferno, surfaced in desperate silver flashes, their bodies convulsing as they died. The Quetzalcoatl staggered once, its immense frame buckling under the onslaught. Then it fell, crashing to the earth with a resounding thud. Inland, in the relative shelter of the forest, the small mammal's world was plunged into darkness. Not the comforting darkness of night, but a choking, oppressive darkness filled with swirling dust and ash, and the deafening thunder of a cataclysmic shockwave that turned the very air into a tangible physical force. The shockwave moved with terrifying speed, far faster than any storm that had ever swept across the land. It punched through forests with ease, flattening trees as if they were blades of grass, snapping trunks like brittle twigs. It shoved water out of riverbeds, leaving behind gaping channels of dry earth. It made the very ground ripple and undulate underfoot, a surreal, terrifying sensation. The mammal was already huddled deep within its burrow when the shockwave arrived, seeking refuge in the earth's embrace. The burrow shook violently as if seized by a giant hand. Dirt and pebbles rained down from the collapsing roof, filling the small space with a choking dust. Roots ripped from the earth above snapped overhead with sharp cracking sounds, and still against all odds it lived. Because sometimes survival is not a matter of strength or cunning, but simply a matter of placement, of being in the right place at the right time. Across the vast oceans, the seismic energy unleashed by the impact traveled through the Earth's crust like the reverberations of a colossal bell. The planet itself rang, a mournful, deafening toll. Earthquakes ripped apart coastlines, collapsing cliffs and swallowing entire beaches. Tsunamis, towering walls of water taller than any cliff face, rose from the distant seas, racing towards land with a black, unstoppable hunger, poised to consume everything in their path. But in those first crucial 5 minutes, one all-consuming catastrophe reigned supreme. Heat. The pulverized debris, launched skyward with such incredible force, began its inevitable descent back to Earth. Returned not as stones or pebbles, but as a torrential rain of incandescent fragments, each one burning fiercely with the friction of re-entry, transformed into miniature meteors by the Earth's atmosphere. Trillions of glowing embers streaked across the sky like the world's worst meteor shower, a deadly spectacle of cosmic proportions. And where they landed, they ignited everything. Forests parched by the initial heat blast, caught like dry tinder, erupting into walls of flame in a matter of seconds. Grasslands exploded in sheets of fire, the flames racing across the dry vegetation with terrifying speed. Even the dense, damp jungles, thick with moisture and seemingly impervious to fire, began to burn as the overwhelming heat overwhelmed the humidity, igniting the undergrowth and sending flames spiraling up into the canopy. It wasn't merely a wildfire, a localized conflagration. It was a planet fire, a global inferno that consumed everything in its path. From horizon to horizon, the Earth was transformed into a single connected blaze, rivers of flame crawling over hills, leaping across valleys, devouring everything that could burn. Smoke rose in thick, dark pillars, reaching towards the heavens, and then merged into a solid, suffocating ceiling of ash, blotting out the sun and plunging the world into premature twilight. The young feathered creature, half bird, half dinosaur, a relic of a dying age, ran blindly through the underbrush, which crackled and popped with the sudden onset of fire. Its instincts screamed, "Hide, hide, hide!" It darted into a narrow hollow beneath a fallen tree, seeking refuge in the damp, decaying wood where the stench of rot clung to the air. The heat rolled in like a living thing, an oppressive wave of searing energy that threatened to suffocate it. Outside, the forest was transformed into a symphony of destruction, the sharp popping of sap, the thunderous collapsing of ancient trunks, the relentless rushing sound of all-consuming flame. The air became thick and sharp, stinging the lungs with every breath. Every inhalation tasted like burning. The creature pressed itself deeper into the hollow, seeking what meager protection it could find, and remained perfectly still, hoping against hope that it would be spared. Elsewhere on a wide open plain, a large herd of hadrosaurs, duck-billed giants, herbivores that had roamed the earth for millennia, panicked, their calls rising and falling in a chorus of confusion and terror, a cacophony that couldn't decide whether to stampede or freeze. Then the fire reached them, an unstoppable tide of destruction. It moved faster than any animal could run, a relentless wave of heat and flame. Flames climbed their legs, raced up their massive sides, and caught in their very breaths, igniting their lungs from the inside out. Some fell immediately, their bodies engulfed in flames. Others ran a few desperate steps, their outlines illuminated in the flickering firelight before collapsing into heaps of smoking ash. Above them, the sky was no longer blue, no longer a source of comfort. It was a bruised and ominous gray streaked with orange and red, a horrifying testament to the destruction below. And the sun, though it was still there, a distant memory, began to vanish slowly behind a growing curtain of smoke and ash, its life-giving light choked by the planet's death throes. Or, in the burrow, the small mammal curled itself into a tight, trembling knot, seeking what comfort it could find in its own small body. Its heartbeat hammered in its chest, a frantic rhythm against the encroaching silence. It could hear distant roaring, not a single roar, but many, the collective sound of a world burning, a symphony of destruction played out on a planetary scale. The burrow grew steadily warmer, the earth itself radiating the heat of the inferno above. Not hot yet, not unbearable, but warming in a way that triggered its deepest instincts, prompting it to dig deeper, to seek greater refuge in the earth's embrace. It clawed frantically at the soil, scraping at the earth with desperate speed, attempting to make the tunnel longer, deeper, a desperate attempt to escape the encroaching heat. The air became thin and heavy, making each breath a struggle. Dust filled its nostrils, stinging its eyes and choking its lungs. It stopped when it could no longer breathe comfortably, when its lungs screamed for relief and pressed its face against a small pocket of slightly cooler dirt, seeking a moment's respite. Outside, ash began to fall, blanketing the landscape in a shroud of death. Not like snow, not with the gentle promise of winter's sleep, like death, a fine, pervasive layer of destruction. Fine gray particles drifted down from the sky, coating every leaf, choking every river, settling on the burning ground and transforming it into a smeared landscape of black and white. A monochrome world devoid of color and life. Above the falling ash, above the billowing smoke, above the entire wounded surface of the planet, a new veil was forming in the stratosphere, the dust cloud, the ultimate shroud. It was composed of pulverized rock, vaporized ocean, soot from the raging global fires, and sulfur-rich aerosols blasted upwards by the force of the impact. It began as a faint smear, a subtle discoloration of the upper atmosphere, then thickened rapidly, coalescing into a dark, ominous mass. Then it began to spread, relentlessly, inexorably. It circled the globe, a dark omen spreading across the planet. And as it spread, it strangled the sunlight, blotting out the life-giving rays and plunging the world into an artificial, premature night. The first few minutes had been fire, a furious and all-consuming inferno. The years that followed would be darkness, a long, drawn-out twilight that would test the limits of survival. But in those first few minutes, the living world still clung to a desperate hope, instinctively, blindly, that if it could just survive the heat, if it could just endure the initial onslaught, it might somehow return to what it had been, to the world it had always known. It didn't understand that the rules had changed, irrevocably, that photosynthesis itself would falter, that the very foundation of the food chain would crumble, that plants would starve without light, withering and dying in the artificial night, that the herbivores dependent on those plants would fall next, their massive bodies unable to sustain themselves in a world without sustenance, that the predators in turn would follow, their reign of terror brought to an abrupt end by the collapse of the ecosystem, that oceans would acidify, poisoned by the toxic rain, and countless marine species would perish. That rain would burn, corrosive and deadly, further devastating the already ravaged landscape. That an era had ended, not with a slow, graceful fade, but with a single, devastating blow. 5. When the first acid rains would come, they would not arrive yet. Not in these first 5 minutes of unimaginable destruction. The complex chemistry needed time high in the atmosphere to transform the sulfurous compounds into a corrosive promise, to brew the deadly cocktail that would further poison the world. But the ingredients were already there, mixing ominously above the clouds, a toxic brew simmering in the stratosphere. And the Earth, still burning, still reeling from the impact, kept turning inexorably beneath them, its rotation indifferent to the unfolding catastrophe. In a coastal cave where water dripped constantly from limestone teeth, a small group of creatures had sought refuge, small reptiles, scurrying insects, perhaps even a frightened juvenile dinosaur pressed against the cool, damp stone. They listened not of in the hall. It didn't. Its throat ached with thirst and the constant inhalation of ash. It learned in the above and the sky because the fire it had been, but as not the this was it drift the sun the shadow bird then the air in the now its eye hunger, but this it was at first its ear no wind the ground was carpeted in ash, a monotonous landscape that puffed softly with every step, releasing a fine cloud of particles into the air. The mammal blinked, its eyes watering and stinging in the ash-filled air, and sneezed, a violent expulsion that cleared its nostrils momentarily. It tried to orient itself by the sun to find its bearings in the altered landscape. There was no sun, only a dim bruise, a faint ethereal glow, barely visible behind the thick layers of haze and smoke. The mammal understood nothing about asteroids, craters, atmospheric aerosols, or the complexities of global climate systems, concepts far beyond its primitive comprehension. But it understood cold, a primal understanding etched into its very being. Cold meant longer nights, nights filled with peril and uncertainty. Cold meant fewer insects, its primary source of sustenance. Cold meant that running out of food was not a possibility but an inevitable schedule, a ticking clock counting down to starvation. And in the days that followed, the cold arrived like a final verdict, a chilling pronouncement of doom. 3. Without sunlight, the world's first engine, the foundation of all life, began to fail, sputtering and dying. Plants. Great green machines that converted light into energy, the silent architects of the ecosystem were suddenly blind, deprived of their lifeblood. Their leaves, out of ingrained habit, still spread towards the sky, seeking the life-giving rays, but the habit became pointless, a futile gesture in the face of the encroaching darkness. Photosynthesis, the miracle that sustained all life, slowed, then faltered, then finally stopped altogether, leaving the world teetering on the brink of collapse. Some plants died quickly, their delicate systems unable to cope with the sudden change, delicate flowering species, shallow-rooted grasses, the ephemeral beauties of the forest floor. Others lingered, stubbornly clinging to life, burning through their stored sugars, cannibalizing themselves to keep their cells alive for a little longer. Leaves yellowed, then withered and fell, leaving bare branches reaching towards the empty sky. Needles dropped from conifers, carpeting the ground in a brown, lifeless layer. The world began to shed its last vestiges of softness, its vibrant colors fading into a dull, monochrome landscape. Herbivores felt the impact first, their survival inextricably linked to the fate of the plant kingdom. The hadrosaur herds that had miraculously survived the initial fires, scarred and weary, searched desperately for food in fields of ash, their massive bodies driven by primal hunger. They tore at blackened stems and chewed on withered leaves, finding only bitterness and disappointment. They moved farther and farther afield, driven by desperation, their mournful calls echoing plaintively in a dim world that refused to answer, their search for sustenance a futile quest. Triceratops, those stubborn tanks of muscle and horn, those formidable herbivores who had roamed the earth for millennia, tried to rip up roots, to find sustenance in the earth's embrace. But the roots were dying too, their life force depleted. Their great bodies, built for constant grazing, needed a constant supply of fuel, and the planet was rapidly becoming a pantry with empty shelves, a world where sustenance was a fading memory. As herbivores weakened, their strength fading and their numbers dwindling, predators followed them, not as kings reigning supreme over their domain, but as scavengers desperately chasing a sinking ship, fighting over scraps and bones. Tyrannosaurs, once the undisputed rulers of the land, the apex predators who had instilled fear into the hearts of all, became gaunt silhouettes, their once powerful frames emaciated and weak. Their eyes, though still burning with the fire of instinct, reflected a desperate hunger. Their bellies drew inward, their ribs becoming visible beneath their scaly skin. They fought viciously over corpses, their roars a desperate challenge in a dying world. They drove smaller hunters away from scraps, protecting their meager sustenance with fierce determination. Even the scraps began to vanish, the carcasses decaying rapidly in the changed environment, their life-giving nutrients returning to the earth. The extinction was not one clean wave, a single swift act of annihilation. It was a cascade, a chain reaction of destruction that rippled through the ecosystem, a domino line so long that it wrapped around the entire Earth, bringing down species after species in a slow, agonizing process. Or the dust cloud did far more than simply darken the sky, casting the world into an artificial twilight. It changed the temperature, altering the climate in profound and devastating ways. Without sunlight, the surface began to cool, the planet losing its vital source of energy. At first, the change was subtle. Cooler nights, a slight chill in the air, longer shadows that lingered into the morning. Then it became sharp, a noticeable drop in temperature that heralded the arrival of a new ice age. Frost appeared where frost had no right to be, coating the landscape in a delicate, deadly layer. Puddles crusted with ice, a stark reminder of the encroaching cold. Creatures that had evolved in a warm, lush Cretaceous world, perfectly adapted to the tropical climate, suddenly found themselves facing a climate that felt like betrayal, a harsh and unforgiving environment that threatened their very survival. In a ravine once lush with ferns and vibrant vegetation, a verdant oasis teeming with life. The feathered creature ventured out cautiously from its shelter, driven by the gnawing pangs of hunger. Its hunger had intensified into a pounding drum, a relentless demand that drove it forward despite the dangers. It hopped across ash-covered ground and brittle twigs, pecking instinctively at anything that might be edible. Its senses heightened in its desperate search for sustenance. It found a beetle, its armored shell reflecting the dim light. The beetle was dead, its body stiff and lifeless. It found another insect, a small winged creature trapped beneath a fallen leaf. Also dead, its delicate wings broken and crumpled. It found a seed, cracked open and bitter, its nutrients already leached out by the toxic rain, and swallowed it anyway, desperate for any kind of sustenance. Above, the air was so thick with dust and smoke that even the sounds of the world seemed muffled, muted by the oppressive atmosphere. The creature's own footsteps sounded wrong, too loud in the unnatural silence, each footfall echoing in the emptiness. It stopped suddenly, its head cocked to one side, listening intently. Something moved, a subtle shift in the air. A shape slid between the black trunks of the charred trees, a fleeting glimpse of movement in the gloom, a small reptile, its scales dulled by ash, its eyes wary. It moved slowly, deliberately, conserving energy in the face of dwindling resources. Its eyes were half-lidded, as if the world was too dim to bother seeing clearly, its senses dulled by starvation. The feathered creature did not attack, did not attempt to claim the reptile as prey. It wasn't built for that. Its body adapted for foraging, not hunting. It simply watched, its sharp eyes measuring the other creature, assessing its strength and its potential threat. Both creatures were survivors, clinging precariously to life in a dying world. Both were starving, their bodies wasting away in the face of dwindling resources. Both were learning new rules, adapting to the harsh realities of the changed environment, move less, conserve energy, waste nothing, take shelter wherever shelter still existed. They went separate ways, each driven by their own desperate search for survival. Survival was no longer a competition for territory, a struggle for dominance. It was a negotiation with physics, a desperate attempt to balance energy expenditure with dwindling resources, a fight against the encroaching darkness and the unforgiving cold. Far away in the vast oceans, the disaster wore a different mask, its effects unfolding in a slow, insidious process. When the asteroid struck, it didn't only launch dust and rock into the atmosphere, obscuring the sun and choking the world. It also blasted vast quantities of sulfur-bearing material high into the stratosphere, especially from the rocks rich in sulfate minerals near the impact zone, the very foundation of the Yucatán Peninsula. In the upper air, exposed to the sun's radiation and the atmosphere's volatile chemistry, those sulfur compounds began to transform, undergoing a series of complex reactions. They met water vapor, forming a deadly union. They formed acids, potent and corrosive, a toxic rain brewing in the heavens. And when the atmosphere, saturated with these poisonous compounds, finally decided to give back what it had taken, it rained. At first, it was just rain, a cold, gray, persistent drizzle that soaked the earth and chilled the bones. Then it became something else, something far more sinister. Acid rain did not announce itself with thunder and lightning with dramatic fanfare. It arrived with quiet cruelty, an insidious assault on the senses, droplets that stung the eyes, burned tender skin, and turned leaves into delicate lace, dissolving their delicate structures. It seeped into the soil, altering the chemistry of life from the inside out, poisoning the very earth that sustained them. Inland, small ponds became sour, their waters transformed into toxic pools, streams tasted wrong, their once clear currents tainted with acid. Creatures that drank too deeply from these contaminated sources vomited violently or weakened, their bodies unable to cope with the poison. The small mammal learned quickly to drink only from places that offered some degree of shelter, instinctively avoiding the open pools, water collected under rocks, protected from the acidic rain, moisture that seeped from deep soil, filtered by the earth's embrace, droplets that gathered in the sheltered depths of caves. Those who drank from open pools, those who were less discerning or less fortunate, often didn't last, their bodies succumbing to the toxic effects. The mammal did not know what acid was, could not comprehend the complex chemical reactions that were poisoning its world. It only knew pain, a searing, burning sensation that assaulted its senses. It only knew that certain water burned its mouth and made its stomach twist and convulse until it could no longer stand, until it was racked with agonizing cramps. So it remembered, its survival depending on its ability to learn from its experiences. And memory, another powerful tool of survival, honed through millennia of evolution, began to do what claws and teeth could not, helping it to navigate the dangers of the changed world. Days passed, each one indistinguishable from the last. Weeks bled into one another, forming an endless cycle of dimness and cold. The world entered a season that had no name because it didn't belong to any pattern life had learned, a disruption so profound that it shattered the established order. The sky remained dim, shrouded in dust and smoke. The cold persisted, biting deeply into flesh and bone. Fires that had once roared with unstoppable fury now smoldered weakly under a thick blanket of ash, releasing smoke in long, weak sighs, a mournful exhalation of a dying world. The greatest creatures, the magnificent giants that had once roamed the earth, began to disappear, their reign coming to an end. Not all at once, not dramatically, not in a single catastrophic event, but in a way that felt inevitable. A slow, steady decline that stripped the world of, for a fleeting moment, the cave transformed into a miniature parliament of survivors. A silent gathering where the feathered creature, the mammal, and the lizard sized each other up, each one a testament to resilience, each one a question mark hanging in the dust-laden air. Their eyes met, not with aggression or fear, but with a shared understanding of their precarious existence. The air hung thick with unspoken anxieties, the future an unwritten chapter shrouded in uncertainty. Then, breaking the spell of silence, the feathered creature, a flicker of life in the dimness, lowered its head. With a delicate precision born of necessity, it pecked at a minuscule insect clinging desperately to the damp cave wall. A tiny act, yet a symbol of the enduring struggle for survival, the mammal remained still, its predatory instincts muted by the overwhelming weight of circumstance. No pounce, no snarl, just a quiet observation. The lizard, normally skittish and quick to flee, stayed put, its scales catching the faint light. It seemed to understand that flight was a luxury they could no longer afford, that safety lay not in evasion but in a fragile truce, because in this unforgiving era, the ancient question of dominance had become tragically irrelevant. The hierarchy of the food chain had crumbled, replaced by a more fundamental, more desperate query. Who can endure this? Who among us possesses the grit, the adaptability, the sheer will to survive? High above this tiny sanctuary, the atmosphere continued its slow, agonizing assault on the ravaged world. The dust cloud, a cosmic wound, encircled the planet like a malignant aura, its tendrils spreading like ink dissolving in water. Soot, ash, and aerosols formed a reflective shield, bouncing precious sunlight back into the cold vacuum of space. The Earth's surface, once vibrant and teeming with life, cooled further, the temperature plummeting into an icy grip. In regions that had once basked in tropical warmth, snow began to fall. Delicate crystalline flakes descended upon a world that had forgotten their touch, a world that had once been a lush, verdant greenhouse. The snow fell upon everything, cloaking the desolate landscape in a ghostly white shroud, covering ash and debris in a layer of frozen silence. During the coldest nights, animals succumbed to the relentless freeze, their bodies stiffening where they lay. Reptiles, dependent on the sun's warmth, suffered the most, their vital functions grinding to a halt unless they could find deep, sheltered havens. Even warm-blooded creatures designed to regulate their internal temperature struggled to survive, forced to burn precious calories just to keep their bodies from shutting down completely. The mammal, however, clung to life by doing what mammals did best, what had been honed by millions of years of evolution. It sought refuge, it minimized energy expenditure, conserving every precious calorie. It persevered, refusing to yield to the encroaching cold, snatched insects whenever it could find them, a meager but vital source of sustenance. It scavenged for scraps when the opportunity arose, gleaning what little nourishment remained from the remnants of the fallen world. And when all else failed, when hunger gnawed and the cold seeped deep into its bones, it slept, entering a state of near hibernation, waiting for the faint promise of a better tomorrow. The feathered creature, on the other hand, survived by embracing flexibility, ate whatever sustenance it could find, seeds, insects, decaying matter, nothing was refused. It flitted between sheltered locations, constantly seeking the warmest spots, the places where life still clung. Its small size, once a disadvantage, had become its greatest asset, and smallness in the grim aftermath of the asteroid was power. Large bodies demanded copious amounts of food, resources that had become scarce and fiercely contested. Small bodies, on the other hand, needed only fleeting opportunities, tiny pockets of abundance that the giants had overlooked. As the agonizing months dragged on, something extraordinary began to happen. The oppressive silence, the deathly hush that had fallen over the world, began to crack. Not with the earth-shattering thunder of dinosaurs, but with small, tentative sounds. Whispers of life in the face of oblivion. Beetle's wing buzzed faintly, a delicate vibration in a sheltered pocket where a few tenacious plants had managed to survive. A worm wriggled through the damp soil beneath a rock, its tiny body a testament to the enduring power of life below the surface. Minuscule shoot of green, fragile yet determined, pushed its way up through the ash, drawn to the thin but persistent sunlight that had finally returned in pale, intermittent strips. The dust cloud, that suffocating blanket that had choked the world, did not vanish overnight. The cataclysmic wound in the sky was slow to heal, but it thinned, imperceptibly at first, slowly, stubbornly, reluctantly, as particles of dust and soot gradually fell out of the atmosphere, settling back onto the ravaged surface, and as the rains, still tinged with acid, washed away the lingering aerosols, the sun began to tentatively reappear, not bright and warm as it had once been, but present nonetheless, a weak lantern flickering in a vast, darkened room. Plants that had somehow clung to life, stubbornly refusing to surrender, responded immediately to the faintest hint of sunlight. Because plants are the ultimate opportunists, the original survivors. They do not mourn the past, they do not hesitate to seize the present, they simply grow when they can, reaching for the light with a silent, desperate hunger. New leaves unfurled, delicate and vibrant against the backdrop of ash and decay. The green returned, spreading in patches, a hopeful mosaic against the gray. The world was still wounded, still cold, still irrevocably changed. The scars of the cataclysm would remain for eons to come, but the long night, the seemingly endless darkness, had finally begun to end. The faintest glimmer of dawn had broken on the horizon. 10. In the cave, one morning, if it could even be called morning, so muted was the light, the mammal emerged from its slumber and caught sight of a faint disk through the lingering haze. The sun, dim, pale, ghostly, but undeniably real. It froze, its nostrils flaring, its senses on high alert. It stood as still as a statue, as if afraid that the fragile sight might vanish if it moved too quickly, that the sun might be a phantom, a cruel trick of the light. The feathered creature came out as well, hopping tentatively into the open, its movements hesitant. tilted its head to the sky, its bright eyes scanning the heavens. It made a small sound, a delicate vocalization that was something between a chirp and a question, a hesitant inquiry directed at the returning light. For a brief, poignant moment, the two survivors stood together in the ash-covered landscape, united in their shared awe and hope as they watched the light. They did not understand the cosmic forces that had ravaged their world, the intricate dance of destruction and renewal. They did not grasp the scientific principles behind the impact event and its aftermath. But they understood the universal language of hope. They understood the primal urge to survive, to rebuild, to carry on. They understood the direction in which their future lay, and in that dim returning sun, in the faint warmth that kissed their faces, the planet whispered its next chapter, a story of resilience and reinvention. Not the reign of giants, their thunderous footsteps silenced forever, but the rise of the adaptable, the nimble, the quick-witted, the small ones, the ones who could live in the cracks, who could thrive in the margins, who could find opportunity in the face of devastation. Part 3. The Age of the Small. The sun did not return as a triumphant conqueror, banners waving and trumpets blaring, returned as a fellow survivor, humbled and weary, yet persistent nonetheless. Its light was thin at first, filtered through the last drifting veils of dust, a gentle caress rather than a blazing inferno. It cast no sharp shadows, offered little warmth, yet even that faint glow was enough to ignite the spark of life, to begin the slow, patient arithmetic of recovery. Green answered light. And where green returned, life inevitably followed, drawn to the promise of nourishment and renewal. The cave by the coast, once a temporary refuge, had gradually transformed into a world in miniature, a microcosm of the larger planet. The small mammal had begun to think of it not merely as shelter from the storm, but as its territory, its domain. Territory did not signify dominance in this new world, but rather familiarity, a deep understanding of its secrets. It meant knowing which cracks in the rock held the most moisture, which insects nested closest to the walls, which stones shifted slightly under weight, revealing hidden burrows. Familiarity was power in these uncertain times, a compass guiding it through the labyrinth of survival. The feathered creature still came and went, its visits sporadic and fleeting. It never stayed long, possessed of a restless spirit that the mammal did not share. As the light strengthened, however slightly, it ventured farther and farther each day, exploring the ravaged landscape, pushing the boundaries of its survival. One morning, as a pale beam of sunlight slipped past the cave mouth, illuminating the darkness within, the mammal followed it outside and saw something it had not witnessed in countless cycles of day and night: green. A thin, fragile shoot had pushed its way through the ash-covered ground not far from the cave entrance. Its leaves were small and trembling, as if unsure whether they were allowed to exist, as if hesitant to claim their place in the world. The mammal approached cautiously, its senses on high alert, and sniffed at the tiny plant. The scent was sharp and alive, a potent aroma that spoke of resilience and renewal. It tentatively bit the edge of a leaf, bitter but undeniably edible. It did not know that this humble shoot belonged to a lineage of plants that would thrive in disturbed landscapes, that would exploit the chaos and devastation left in the wake of the asteroid. It did not know that evolution, in its relentless pursuit of survival, favored the opportunist, the adaptable, the quick to seize an advantage. It only knew that food had transformed from a distant memory, a nostalgic echo of a lost world, into a tangible presence, a source of sustenance in a barren land. 2. The great bodies, the colossal forms that had once dominated the landscape, were mostly gone now, reduced to skeletal remains. Occasionally a skeleton lay half-buried in soot, a stark reminder of the vanished giants, a ribcage arching like the wreckage of a long-lost shipwreck, a skull grinning inanely at a sky that had forgotten its thunder, its roars silenced forever. The age of thunder had ended not with a bang, but with a quiet, sorrowful whimper. Scavengers, both large and small, finished what starvation had begun, picking the carcasses clean. Insects, ever-present and opportunistic, laid their eggs in the cooling flesh, their larvae feasting on the remnants of the fallen titans. Microbes, unseen, unstoppable, the ultimate recyclers, did their patient work, breaking down organic matter, returning its constituent elements to the earth. Nutrients released from the decaying bodies seeped back into the soil, enriching the barren ground. Ash mixed with decay, forming a fertile compost, a foundation for future growth, and the land, though scarred and ravaged, began to slowly reset, to heal from the wounds of the cataclysm, to prepare for a new chapter in its long and tumultuous history. The feathered creature, leaner now, its senses honed by necessity, its reflexes sharpened by constant peril, found more insects near these carcasses. The decaying flesh attracted flies and beetles, providing a vital source of protein. It had grown bolder, faster to dart and seize its prey, its small body a blur of motion. Its feathers, though singed in places by the firestorms, had molted and regrown, stronger and more resilient than before. It leapt from stone to stone with newfound agility, its wings fluttering in short bursts, testing their capabilities. Those wings were not yet built for sustained flight, for soaring through the skies like the birds of ages past, but they were becoming something, evolving with each passing generation, adapting to the challenges of the new world. 3. Cold still ruled the nights, its icy grip tightening with each setting sun, though the dust had thinned. Allowing more sunlight to reach the surface, the planet remained cooler than it had been before the impact, its climate disrupted and unpredictable. Seasons felt wrong, compressed, uneven, their familiar rhythms distorted by the atmospheric upheaval. Storms arrived without pattern, unleashing their fury with little or no warning. Rain still carried a faint sting, a lingering trace of the acid that had washed from the sky, burning the skin and damaging delicate vegetation. In low valleys, frost clung to new growth, its icy tendrils suffocating the fragile shoots that dared to emerge. Many reptilian species, unable to regulate their own body heat, vanished in waves, their populations collapsing under the relentless cold. Those that survived did so by retreating underground, seeking refuge in burrows and caves, by slowing their metabolisms, entering a state of torpor, waiting out the cold spells in a near hibernatory slumber. Mammals, however, carried their warmth inside, a biological advantage that allowed them to thrive in the face of adversity. The small mammal from the cave had begun to reproduce, its reproductive cycle accelerated by the pressures of survival. Its first litter was small, two blind, wriggling forms no larger than leaves, utterly dependent on their mother's care. It groomed them constantly, licking them clean and curling its body around theirs, sharing its precious warmth, protecting them from the cold. Milk sustained them when insects were scarce, providing a rich and readily available source of nourishment. Milk, an innovation older than the asteroid, a gift from evolution, became a secret weapon in the New World, a key to mammalian success. While larger creatures required constant external resources, the mammal could create food from its own body, converting scarce resources into sustenance for its offspring. It did not think of this as strategy, as a calculated move in the game of survival, but strategy was written into its bones, encoded in its DNA, a legacy of millions of years of evolutionary refinement. 4. Across continents, in isolated pockets of survival, similar stories unfolded. Burrowing mammals multiplied quietly, their numbers increasing exponentially as they exploited their underground havens. Insects rebounded quickly, as they always do, exploiting every available niche, filling the void left by the vanished giants. Fungi bloomed in the damp remains of forests, feeding on rot and decay, breaking down dead organic matter. Fungi did not need sunlight. They thrived in shadow, flourishing in the darkness beneath the forest floor. For a time, the earth belonged to them, a fungal kingdom that stretched across the ravaged landscape. In forests reduced to charcoal pillars, mushrooms rose in clusters, pale and alien, their fruiting bodies erupting from the charred earth. The mammal discovered them and tested one cautiously, its instincts guiding it. Some were poisonous, their toxins causing sickness and death. It learned which ones were not, memorizing their shapes and colors, adding to its growing repertoire of survival skills. Learning became inheritance. What one generation survived through trial and error, the next inherited as instinct, a legacy passed down through the generations. The feathered creature also learned, adapting to the changing landscape. It discovered that seeds, though scarce, persisted in the soil, protected by their hard outer shells. It cracked them with increasing skill, using its beak as both tool and weapon, extracting the nutritious kernels within. Its digestive system, efficient and flexible, allowed it to process what others could not, extracting sustenance from a wide range of food sources. Feathers insulated it against the chill, providing a crucial layer of protection against the cold. Light bones made escape easier when danger appeared, allowing it to take to the skies with minimal effort. It did not know it was walking the edge between two eras, straddling the divide between the world of dinosaurs and the age of birds, one foot in the past, the other in the future. The oceans suffered deeply, perhaps even more so than the land. Plankton populations had crashed when sunlight vanished, plunging the marine ecosystem into darkness. Without plankton, the foundation of the marine food web, food chains fractured from the bottom up, collapsing under their own weight. Coral reefs bleached and died, their vibrant colors fading into a ghostly white. Ammonites, ancient and spiral-shelled, faded into extinction, their lineage extinguished after hundreds of millions of years. But even in the sea, in the depths of the ocean, survivors adapted, clinging to life against all odds. Deepwater organisms, less dependent on surface light, endured, continuing to thrive in the perpetual darkness. Some fish species persisted in scattered pockets, finding refuge in the depths or in isolated hydrothermal vents. Marine reptiles vanished, but smaller, more flexible lineages began to diversify, seizing the opportunities left by their larger cousins. The extinction had erased giants on land and in sea alike, creating a vast emptiness. The empty spaces they left were invitations, a chance for new life to emerge and fill the void. Evolution does not tolerate vacancy for long, always seeking to fill every available niche, to explore every possible avenue for survival. Years passed, blurring into a monotonous cycle of struggle and adaptation. The sky grew clearer, the dust gradually settling, allowing more sunlight to reach the surface. Sunlight strengthened, its warmth slowly returning to the ravaged planet. Forests began to return, reclaiming the land inch by inch. Not the same forest that had existed before, not the same species, but new compositions adapted to the changed environment. Flowering plants spread aggressively, exploiting disturbed soil, their seeds carried by wind and water. Grasses, humble and resilient, expanded into open spaces, their roots anchoring the soil, preventing erosion. Where once enormous sauropods had trampled pathways through fern forests, now smaller animals traced new routes through young woodlands, their nimble feet creating new trails. The mammals' offspring grew quickly, driven by the relentless pressures of survival. They were curious, exploring their surroundings, venturing farther and farther from the safety of the cave. Their eyes were sharp, their senses finely tuned to subtle shifts in air and ground, allowing them to detect danger and find food. One of them, a slightly larger female with a pale streak along her back, distinguishing her from her siblings, showed unusual boldness, a spark of individuality. She climbed low shrubs, testing her agility. She investigated hollow logs, seeking out insects and hiding places. She survived her first winter, enduring the harsh conditions and the scarcity of food. Then her second, proving her resilience and adaptability. Survival, repeated often enough, becomes dominance, a testament to the power of endurance. 7 predators did not vanish entirely. Smaller theropod dinosaurs lingered for a time, feathered and cunning, their predatory instincts honed by the struggle for survival. Crocodilians thrived in warming rivers, their cold-blooded nature proving surprisingly resilient. Snakes slithered through new undergrowth, ambushing their prey with stealth and precision, but none grew to the monstrous scales of their predecessors, the colossal predators that had ruled the world before the asteroid. The world had shifted toward efficiency, prioritizing adaptability and intelligence, toward agility, favoring quickness and maneuverability, toward intelligence, rewarding problem-solving and strategic thinking. Brains are expensive organs, requiring a constant supply of energy. In a devastated world where resources were scarce and competition fierce, only creatures that could secure consistent resources could afford to grow larger minds, to invest in intelligence. Mammals, with their warm blood, their varied diets, and their adaptable nature, began to experiment with different survival strategies, exploring the possibilities of the New World. Some grew slightly larger, taking advantage of the absence of the giant dinosaurs. Some adapted for climbing, seeking refuge in the trees. Some for digging, creating underground burrows for shelter and protection. Diversity returned slowly but steadily, filling the niches left by the extinct species, creating a new tapestry of life. The feathered creature changed too, evolving in response to the new environment. Its descendants developed stronger wings, lighter skeletons, refined flight muscles, becoming ever more adept at aerial navigation. Trees newly returned to the landscape offered vertical escape routes and safe nesting sites, encouraging the evolution of arboreal lifestyles. Flight, once optional, a mere enhancement, became essential, a necessity for survival in a world filled with danger. The sky, once filled with the leathery wings of pterosaurs, was open, awaiting a new generation of avian masters. The descendants of dinosaurs claimed it anew, but in smaller, swifter forms, adapting to the challenges of the new era. They sang, not roars, the thunderous pronouncements of a bygone age. Songs, delicate melodies carried on the wind. The first simple calls echoed across recovering forests, tentative and hopeful. They were not yet complex melodies, but they were beginnings, the first notes in a symphony of avian evolution. Millions of years would pass, an incomprehensible span of time. The cave by the coast would erode, its rocky walls crumbling into the sea. The skeletons within would fossilize, becoming silent witnesses to a cataclysmic event. Continents would drift, colliding and separating, reshaping the Earth's surface. Mountains would rise and fall, sculpted by the forces of plate tectonics and erosion. The small mammal's lineage would branch and branch again, diversifying into countless forms, into climbers, runners, swimmers, each adapted to a specific environment, into hoofed grazers, cropping the grasses of the plains, into sharp-toothed hunters stalking their prey through the forests, into primates that grasp branches with curious hands, exploring the world with their nimble fingers. And in one thin, improbable branch of that sprawling tree, something extraordinary would occur, a pivotal moment in the history of life on Earth. A primate would stand upright, freeing its hands from the task of walking. Its hands would evolve into instruments of manipulation, capable of creating tools and art. Its brain would expand beyond the realm of immediate survival, developing the capacity for abstract thought, for creativity, for empathy. It would look up at the sky, not in fear of falling fire, not in terror of another asteroid impact, but in wonder, contemplating the mysteries of the universe. 10. On a distant future night, under the light of 1,000,000 stars, a human child would gaze at the heavens and ask with innocent curiosity, "What happened to the dinosaurs?" And scientists would answer with evidence buried in rock layers, with the tools of science and reason, a thin band rich in iridium, a rare element associated with meteorites, shocked quartz, a mineral altered by the force of an impact, a massive crater hidden beneath Mexico's soil, a scar left by the asteroid's collision. They would speak of an asteroid, a cosmic bullet that had struck the Earth with devastating force, of firestorms that had raged across the planet, consuming everything in their path, of darkness and acid rain plunging the world into a long and agonizing winter. They would measure extinction percentages and construct climate models, quantifying the devastation with scientific precision. But beneath all those facts, beneath the graphs and statistics, lies the quieter, more profound truth. The world ended, a cataclysmic event that reshaped the course of life on Earth. And then it began again, slowly, painstakingly, building itself anew from the ashes of the old, because in a cave under ash-dark skies, a small mammal chose to emerge, venturing out into the desolation. Because a feathered survivor learned to eat seeds, adapting to the scarcity of food. Because life, when cornered, when faced with seemingly insurmountable odds, does not surrender easily, changes, adapting, evolving, finding new ways to survive. The sky fell, unleashing its fiery wrath. The giants vanished, their reign brought to an abrupt and definitive end. The age of thunder ended, its echoes fading into silence. And in the silence that followed, in the aftermath of the catastrophe, the age of the small began, a new era of opportunity. From that smallness came forests, thriving and resilient, reclaiming the land. Oceans reborn, teeming with new forms of life, mammals that ruled continents, filling the niches left by the dinosaurs, and eventually, after millions of years of evolution, us. If you enjoyed drifting off with us tonight, don't forget to subscribe to 100 Sleepy Facts for more peaceful facts.